So, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be back on the Wamly podcast. I am so excited to have my guest here with me today, Annette. Thank you so much for being here, Annette.
Looking forward to the discussion, Francois.
Excellent, Annette. So, before we get into what is going to be a very exciting and relevant topic today, I'd love for you to just start and introduce yourself to the audience and maybe just talk a bit about your current role.
Awesome. So I'm going to actually take you a little bit further back just to tell you that I'm actually a very local girl, but not locally here. I actually originally come from the Eastern Cape, a very small little town called Sinsa. I grew up there, and just an interesting fact that I could actually speak Xhosa before I could speak English. So Afrikaans was my home language, and then Xhosa was my second language, and then third language was English. And now today we use English a lot. So I'm currently at Momentum Metropolitan. I head up a human capital team there, looking after the group IT environment, group marketing, as well as group human capital. And this year I'm going for my 10th year at Momentum Metropolitan already. They did warn me that when you arrive, you will not leave again. I initially laughed and thought, oh, my longest stint at any place was between 6 and 7 years. And guess what? They seem to be telling the truth there. So yes, that's where I'm at the moment.
Fantastic. And it's so interesting to meet someone that can speak Xhosa. Do you still have that? Can you still speak it?
Yes, I can, and I can hear you cannot because your pronunciation of the ko is not correct. But I'm joking. No, I try and use it. The sad thing with a language is if you don't often use it, you lose it. And I think that's, I suppose, the same thing with general skills. For me, it's quite important that at work, there's a few people that actually know I can speak Xhosa, and we engage often with conversation there.
That's phenomenal. So Annette, you're actually the second guest that I'm talking to that look after both marketing and human capital. And just as a side comment, I find that extremely interesting. And I guess in a sense, it makes sense that human capital and marketing, do in a way complement each other.
Sure, for sure. I've been privileged to look after the marketing team now for the past 2 years. And I think the one thing that I've realized in this whole introduction to them and getting to know them a bit better is that as much as we are different, we are also the same. And I think the big aspect around marketing, what I've learned was that all our employees are actually our best marketers. So if we've got happy employees, and that's where the group human capital and the human capital people play a huge role, then we've got people who can actually go and share what is happening in the company, our brand, etc. So if we start with our employees and they're happy and the human capital side, then the marketing side takes it and runs with it, and they come up with creative ideas on how to share the message.
Amazing. So happy people, happy brand.
Oh, yes, for sure. I mean, how many times do you not hear that get referrals from friends? We get our best referrals from people we know, and not necessarily from a cold calling individual that calls and says wants to sell something to us.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I think that's so powerful. And I think, when you get the recruitment then right and you bring in the right people that do match your culture and your brand, then that automatically flows over into the way we present and position ourselves and our brand, right?
Absolutely. If I just think of how many people in our company are now out on the social media and will quickly share if something great happens. And I'm thinking at the moment of the Momentum Metropolitan Proteas that are doing so well and through to the semi-finals, and how our employees are actually supporting them. And the brand awareness, because is just there. So very proud of what our employees are doing, supporting our marketing teams and what they're doing out there as well.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. And I guess for the audience listening, if you aren't looking at both departments, which doesn't happen very often, then at least work very close with the marketing department if you're in HR and human capital, right?
100%. Because if I just think of the value that the marketing brought into the human capital environment, into my original environment, is that they helped us to voice messages to employees that we get the message across correctly. And it might be a human capital message, a thing around well-being or recruiting. I mean, how we're writing our actual recruiting adverts at the moment looks very different because marketing came and they gave us some insights. So partnership, that's the big important thing here.
Amazing. Now, Annette, speaking about brand, I guess you'll have to go very far in South Africa, at least, to find someone who's never heard of Momentum. I mean, it's such a prominent and strong brand. And looking at our topic for today around how do we bring back the vibe into the work family, I'd love to hear your take on your specific context and environment over the last 2 years with the pandemic. From a human capital and from a business and from a people specifically perspective, kind of how did that go down? What happened? Sure. Did you guys go to work from home, everybody hybrid? Take me back 2 years, please.
Sure. So I think once the announcement in March 2020 came out that we needed to move and go into lockdown, I have never seen an IT team like ours and get things going and move computers of around about 16,000 people within 2 weeks.
Wow.
And within those 2 weeks, they got people to actually work from home.
Sure.
Not necessarily 100% effective at the start, but what that team really did, and they also got an amazing award for doing it, because if it wasn't for them, the whole business wouldn't be able to function. So COVID-19 was tough. I don't think there's a company that can say it wasn't affected. It affected our bottom line. It affected our employees, our well-being of our employees, mental well-being specifically. Sure. Remember, not everyone's got families at home. There's some people who are actually sitting sole alone at their houses, working digitally and virtually for a period of time and didn't have any opportunity to connect with people. So again, what the teams did and what they got right was really, really, really phenomenal. And then out of that, a lot of great things also happened, because in this virtual world in which we are in, we managed to get things like our passports going. So we have a Momentum Metropolitan little passport that's got a photo on, and all the COVID questions are asked. And on a daily basis, you get your little passport, you fill it in. And for that also, I need to say it's not my team that did that. That was the group human capital team, but they actually got an award last year at the CHRO awards. So great things also came out of it. It's not just bad things that happened.
Yeah. So in effect, level lockdown 5, everybody went home. And for how long did that remain the status quo?
Sure. It actually remained till recently, because the opportunity then came about actually to revamp one of our biggest offices, our Momentum office in Centurion. And a lot of the areas that had to have people on site, and it was really just the essential workers, they were on site all along. But the others managed to work effectively from home. So we put certain systems in place, phone that the people could call from their PCs. We arranged that there was Wi-Fi, 3G connection, all of that was in place. And that made a huge impact on, I truly believe, on the performance of our company. So if I think of our call centers, how they had to do things differently. I mean, now you had to sit at your dining room table and take calls from clients with your big PC, because remember, some of us still had those big, or not me, had the big PC here next to, not the laptop that I have. Yes. So it was a different approach. And then in the background, you hear the children or the dog. And I do think we as human beings have adapted a bit to that. I think in the beginning, we all laughed at those TikTok videos that came out of the child here at the back, or someone running past in a towel maybe, or something. Yeah. And I think, but afterwards, they got used to that. And now we in a hybrid environment. So some of us are back at the office, but not full time. And there are people that are back at the office full time because it makes sense. So it's all about what makes sense for the business.
Yeah, and I think considering the landscape, I guess everybody's context will determine the way forward. But I think one of the questions that I have for you is, if we go into this conversation around should we come back, should we not come back, what is the best way to go forward? What are some of your thoughts around the advantages and disadvantages of not coming back? Because I've heard many organizations, they stop their lease, they sold their building, the logo is off, and we completely virtual. So what is your opinion around that in terms of, considering elements like mental well-being, engagement, the connection, the relationships, and everything that we like, well, at least the extroverts?
Phew, Francois, you're asking many questions, but I'm going to try and answer them one by one. So if I forget a few, just stop and just re-question me again. So I think a key aspect is that you've got to do what's right for your business and your people. There's different types of people, exactly what you said, extrovert, introverts. And I found with our IT people, they loved this lockdown. There were people that said, I've never been as effective as I was. The human capital people were saying, oh, I don't see the people. What are they doing? Are they okay? Marketing people will say, when are we going to get together again? So it depends on the type of people and then ultimately what you want to achieve. So there's areas in our environment that are back full time, working well back in their little environments where they are at, and there's others who are following the hybrid. Now, I do think for the future, hybrid's going to be the way to go, because we're also finding that people want the option to choose how they do it. Yes. And that's something that you actually give your employees. And it puts trust into the employees to say, I trust that you can, with what I want out of you, do what's best for you and for the company. And the old traditional office isn't going to be like that anymore. We'll probably find more people coming to the office just to connect and collaborate. So that engagement opportunities. I heard someone the other day at the office saying, why would I come to the office if I sit behind a computer all the time? And why I need to dress up to come to the office, actually. So it's the mindset change that needs to happen to say, when I go to the office, I'll plan it, make sure that my team members are maybe there. And it might not be on a daily basis. It might be once every second week or once every month. And in saying that, we've also found that people have moved away in this pandemic. So not everyone is in the centers anymore. So we've also got to consider that. And what is that doing to our culture?
In hindsight, looking back now to everything that happened and all the decisions we were in the beginning forced to make, where most organizations weren't necessarily ready. You know, I remember back then a lot of our clients scrabbling to get together a work from home policy. You know, how do I now manage you? How do I trust you? I guess this has forced HR into a more strategic business partner role than just the traditional administrative tasks, right?
Absolutely. So I think if you haven't been in human capital in this time, this is a time for human capital to shine. And why I'm saying that is never in my nearly 30 years career have I been so involved in business decisions as right now, where our voice as human capital business partners matters because our people really, really matter. And I think that's important because it's not just creating a guideline. It's really thinking about what is the impact of this decision I'm going to make. So now where we are at now, where people are saying, should I come to the office or shouldn't I? What's the impact of either coming or not coming to the office? All of that plays a role. And that's where we, as the custodians of our people, play a key role in guiding our leaders. And fortunately, our leaders are open to discussions. And I think that's one aspect. And our employees are challenging us in many aspects, which is right. I mean, we're all human beings. So far, we've been fortunate. We've been able to accommodate in most areas people's needs, whatever it might be. Because people aren't the same that they were 2 years ago. Circumstances have changed. People have not just moved out necessarily out the city areas, but they might have given up aftercare for their children. Now they've got to go and redo the aftercare only for 2 days a week. Is it possible? So those are things that needs to sort it out over time.
Yeah, Annette, and I mean, you're touching on so many golden nuggets here that I'd like to deep dive into. I think the first is there's this balance that needs to be struck between what the people want and what the business requires. And somewhere in there's bound to be conflict. How are you and your organization going about facilitating those conversations? And I'm specifically asking this because some of our listeners might be experiencing that exact same tension at the moment and not understanding how to approach that and then end up either ignoring it or fighting. And so I would just love to hear, to the extent that you're allowed to share, what is the nature of those interactions?
I think a key aspect that stands out for me is transparent conversations, communication around why is there a need for you either to be back at the office, and not kind of or cloaking it, and that might not be the right English word, with saying, oh, but we want you to engage at the office. If it's performance related and I actually want to see what you're doing, address the performance. Do not shy away from that. Do not use an excuse to be at the office, not to address performance, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes.
If it is for us to collaborate and that you can work more effectively, because there are teams that work more effectively together. If you want to brainstorm, etc., you can do it online and virtually. Yet we have found that it just brings a different energy, dynamic, and creativity if the people are together. So apply what's needed for that situation. A blanket approach for all isn't going to work.
That's it.
So having those leaders to have those conversations with the people. So shying away from it is unfortunately not the answer. It's having those crucial conversations, as they say.
And I guess, we hear the term crucial conversations quite often. And I mean, there's workshops and theoretical models around this, but practically on the ground, I guess you mentioned a word earlier around trust, and how to incorporate trust in a relationship, in a professional context that then makes sense for an outcome that works for both parties, right?
Yeah, look, I do think, and this is a personal opinion, so it's not necessarily an academic view or theoretical view. I personally, if I trust someone, oh my word, I can go walk a long way with that person. Yeah. And if it's not there, it's effort. And it takes a lot of energy, because you kind of check the intent and you check the reason why people are doing things. And constantly or consistently, I have to find myself that I've got to check my perspective as well. Or am I not reading something into the situation that's actually not there? And that's why it is important to put your cards on the table, to have the frank conversations and not to kind of approach it in a different way. We might think we're doing it softly, but we're actually doing no person in that conversation actually a favor.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. So now I've spoken to so many organizations and employees that are either forced to, or, because of context, have to come back. And I don't know if you experience this and our listeners also experience this, but there seems to be quite a lethargic resistance towards coming back and almost going back to how things were. We've seen so much progression. We've seen organizations being forced to adopt and adapt to technology. I'd love to hear, back to our topic, what are some of the initiatives that you are doing to get that vibe and that energy back?
Can I give you an easy one?
Yes.
Make great coffee at the office. No, this is really a joke, but we have got great coffee at the office. Look, for IT environments, coffee is a very, very key aspect around creating a attraction why we want to be at the office. We've had many meetings around what type of coffee we need to have at the office. So on a more serious note, it's really that vibe that you're talking about is not necessarily the vibe that used to be there, what people think they're coming back to. And I think that also needs to be realistic, because we've got to tackle the problem at where it is at. I personally love going back to the office again. My best IT developer doesn't like that. So why would he have to come to the office? It might be just to pop in to meet someone. So create those opportunities, and really guiding our leaders at the moment to say to them, create connection opportunities. Whether you know your team well, is your team people who want to meet one-on-one, then maybe office isn't even the answer. Go to a coffee shop somewhere and meet them, or a tea shop, whatever you want to call it. So again, around what works for those people. One thing we cannot shy away from is performance and results are important. We don't want to compromise anything around that. So if it's needed that the teams have to be at the office and they deliver better, then they need to be there and conversations need to take place and giving them enough notice, etc. Yet the other thing that I think we need to think differently a little bit about is what type of meetings are we having? Are we just having meetings to check that the people are at the office, or is it actually meetings that we doing to contribute? And what type of meetings are we having? And then get a little bit physical, do things differently. We laugh because we're saying, and this is something I learned from the marketing team, where they say, let's walk and talk. And I said to them first time, what do you mean walk and talk? And they said, no, in this area, we do our meetings walking. Now, okay, let's try it out. It works brilliant. Early morning meeting is a walk and talk meeting. A lunchtime meeting is a cook and connect. And do it differently. Yeah. So we have lunch together, whether we make it together or where we just sit and actually connect together.
Yeah, I love what you're saying from a practical perspective, because when we say let's connect, I mean, what does that look like? What does that mean? And what I'm hearing you say is creating meaningful experiences where, yes, we are working, but there's also something else that pulls us together. So, walking, having lunch, doing breakfast, going to the coffee shop, but then actually also getting the job done.
Look, that's the non-negotiable. The job needs to be done. So we're not negotiating on that. It's in the how.
Yes.
If you have fun doing something, you're going to want to do it again. You're going to want to replicate it. So we're finding, because it's now got this nice vibe back at the office, the chairs are nice. It's not these chairs that we got 2 years ago from the office now that's kind of not sitting so well. It's nice chairs, and we want to actually go and use that chair at the office, etc. So it's creating a vibe that people want to go to, not forced to go to.
Where they enjoy being there.
Yes. I can't wait to go. And yes, I'm also an extrovert, as you can see. And the introverts, I laughed the other day. There was an introvert there sitting. And when I saw him, I went and sat next to him. I said, guess what? I'm your partner for today. And I could see his face go down a little bit. And then he said to me, do you know why I'm here? And I said, I've got no idea. He said, I don't have power. My diesel costs now too much to get the generator going. He says, and I really miss the coffee. And I thought, okay, well, that enforces the idea around having good coffee at the office.
That's it. So I'm hearing you say a couple of things. The first is you had an opportunity to revamp your offices and make the ergonomic environment more attractive. So the chairs, the coffee, the look and the feel, the vibe. So that's from
the meeting rooms, 100%. And I mean, that's a science on its own. So really, meeting rooms, collaboration, where people can write things together that they can't have it alone at home.
Sure. I recently visited Deloitte's office in Cape Town, and I was there in a room called the Accelerator. And it felt like something from the future, but also a playroom, but also expecting somewhere a Nintendo or an Xbox to pop out of the wall. And engaging with them, the team there, they mentioned exactly what you just said around collaboration. Because ultimately, when we get together, there's a reason for that. It's not just to sit next to each other with headphones. And then creating that environment that can actually encourage the collaboration, I'm hearing you say, is so important. And so if you're listening to this and your building is slightly older, you don't have an interactive meeting room, that might be the first place to go and look at, to help individuals and encourage them to come back.
And really, Francois, they don't have to spend enormous amounts of money. It's moving things around. Instead of having small little desks, each on their own, it might be having an open space. And if there are people that want to have a little bit of isolation, privacy, maybe put 1 or 2 plants up there, etc., to still create that for them. Because we're not saying everyone has the same needs. Let's see how we can adapt, but let's think creatively and differently. So don't go and spend excessive amounts of money. I mean, if I think we're talking about revamping our offices, we reused most of our old material, old desks, etc., but just moving them around, putting them at a different angle, you arrive and think, oh, where was this before? Never seen it. We covered chairs. I'm saying we, the company, covered chairs just in a different color. That's it. Color makes a difference. Light makes a difference. Open up a blind, close a blind, etc.
That's it. I think the second thing that I'm also hearing is in bringing individuals back, the engagement and the collaboration in a new way, as opposed to just repeating, for example, you said around meetings, and not just repeating the habits and the patterns that we had in the past. But actually, this is an opportunity to reconsider, should we be having a daily stand-up or an exco or whatever that meeting is every day at 12 o'clock, and really deep dive and go and zoom in on the actual value of those meetings. And then if yes, can we do them differently, like walking or having lunch? And if no, can we can them entirely and chuck out the legacy?
It's always good to check and recheck a bit what we're doing, if it's still the right, and if it's still on track, and if it's actually still useful. So does it contribute or doesn't it? And a simple example that I'm going to use is not just a meeting, but is maybe a newsletter. If we always used to send out newsletters for the past 15 years, are people still reading them? And I'm not saying don't get rid of newsletters. I'm just using it as an example. Go and see, maybe we need to revamp it, because handing out that paper that arrives here at outside at our garage every morning, that's not relevant anymore. And I think make sure that whatever's done is relevant for the people. We've got a lot of youngsters, young talent that's joining our organization. How do they see these connection opportunities? Yes. I mean, onboarding people virtually has been in our environment really, really tough. Making them part of a culture and letting them feel the culture that was there before was tough. Yeah. Now we can we've got a different opportunity having these engagements and making sure we kind of re-onboard the people so that they can actually feel it again. So there's many opportunities, and I think we've got to rethink how we do things continuously.
That's it. Can't agree with you more. Do you mind sharing what has changed from an onboarding perspective pre and post COVID in your context? Specifically looking at some of the touch points.
Yeah, so look, pre-COVID, it was great. We had meetings together. We introduced them in the morning, walked around, said, let's come, let's take our cup of coffee, and we go and we arrange buddy meetings, face-to-face meetings. And because we were fortunate in some of our areas, we've got offices in Durban, already in Sandton, Centurion, Cape Town. So we already had a part of a virtual onboarding already. Okay. Yet when the pandemic struck, we had to rethink everything. And it was making that person feel special. So it was suddenly where we had to go and deliver things at their house. And again, it doesn't have to be expensive, but saying to them, listen, at that time, the team's going to meet you. We're all going to have Uber Eats and virtually meeting. Oh, cool. Cameras on. Okay, they can see one another, not cameras off. And intentionally getting that buddy system very, very strong. So that individual then is got someone that they can go back to over and over. Unfortunately, it didn't work in all areas. So people came and they left. But as we continued with the journey, we learned more. The other thing, as soon as we got to a point where we could meet, we arranged then that the people could meet one another one-on-ones. So the buddy and that individual then met. Again, it's effort, but it's worthwhile. It's absolutely worthwhile.
Yes. Yeah, I think sometimes, especially if you're not open to change that easily, a pandemic or any sort of crisis forces one to reimagine and relook your current way of work and then really take the feedback and understand, if this is the opportunity, let's grab it and let's make something of it.
Yeah. And that's where you need to also, and the leaders were amazing, actually, they stayed close. So instead of allowing the individual to get to know the team, they actually took them and got to introduce them often to the team and took them along to other virtual meetings and said, listen, so instead of being introduced once off at the office to everyone, they were reintroduced a few times. And it might be then whether some of the leaders actually got to a point to say, listen, have you been introduced to this forum or not? But let's reintroduce you. Guess who's here? To make the people aware of the individual. And we really encouraged our current employees to reach out. Now, for some, it's a natural thing. It's not natural for everyone. And we really encourage them to say, reach out. Here's a new person. Remember, we're virtual. They don't see you. They've got no idea who you are. Reach out.
That's it. Annette, I want us to end off with two more questions from my side. I think the first one is, you mentioned earlier around performance management. And some individuals in the audience or our listeners might go, yes, work from home, but it's really difficult to manage performance then, because the perception was, I have to see you to manage you. What are your thoughts around that? And how are you looking at that for the future?
So performance management is generally, when we start talking, that it's an interesting topic. And our company has actually moved away from performance management, and we call it performance excellence, because we're trying to put the focus on the positive. And why we're saying that specifically is that if people see the value in what they can achieve, they'll work towards it. We'll always get people who aren't achieving that. If it's realistic and they're not achieving it, there is a definite process there. I do think it's a mindset change, as I mentioned just now on something else as well. If we still believe we've got to see people to manage them, then we're still very, very old school, and we really need to do some internal looking at ourselves here. Those days have passed. I mean, we're working in a global environment where people now sit across the world, and we need to learn to focus on those things and what is the opportunity there. Our skills in South Africa, we're going to lose our skills if we do not think differently, and that's a topic for another day. But from a performance point of view, really, there's definitely things that we can use to measure. So let's make sure that what we can measure it, and be clear with the communication. Have much more regular check-ins. Don't wait for performance management cycle to happen once a year. Yes. Do that on a monthly basis, or when something doesn't work, communicate it, feedback. So there's many opportunities. Again, as leaders, we need to take the steps there, and we need to reach out, because if I have employees working for me and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing or in line with what we've agreed, I'm responsible ultimately for it. And I, as the leader of that team, they need to step up.
Absolutely. I can't agree with you more. And I so often engage with HR teams, and there's this perception that HR doesn't have a voice. They don't have a seat around the table. They're only there as a shared service to do admin. But actually, the pandemic has proven and shown us that there's such a huge responsibility on human capital to have this incredible influence and voice, especially on all the topics that you and I have discussed today.
And I think it's a belief system that we have, that we are a support service. I mean, a support service is great and it's important. Yet what do we believe about what the value we're adding as human capital people? We're specialists in our own environment. We're specialists of people, of human behavior. I'm not going to go to a marketing specialist and tell them how to go and market this brand. I can give them input and we can share ideas, etc. But I'll come from my environment and my speciality. So leaders are trusting us. And that's why it's so important to make sure that the value we add is a strategic value add, where we look at it differently. And we need to step out of our comfort zone. We need to be up to date with what's happening in the world. Yes. Listen to other individuals, learning. We've got to be lifelong learners. I mean, we cannot go and preach things, and I'm saying the word preach, but share with our leaders if we don't know what's happening. We need to also understand business, and that's the other aspect. If we guide and walk along with our leaders on this journey, we need to understand why are they saying certain things and why do they need things. People are core in all businesses. So if our people aren't at a place where they can add value, our leaders aren't going to be able to achieve their objectives ultimately. So as human capital people, we need to also step up. We need to get rid of this belief system that we just a support or a shared services, etc. Because that belief system could be our biggest holdback, actually.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as an HR community, we need to take the voice back. We need to put on that armor and believe in our ability and our value and what we can bring to the table. And thank you so much, Annette. This was incredible insight. I know that the audience listening will have been inspired and is inspired and taken so much value out of this as I have. Maybe a very last question from my side around, just encouraging the community listening, wanting to bring individuals back, getting that resistance that we don't want to. Maybe a final thought from your side around how to achieve that.
I think a big aspect is engagement. Engage and understand why do they not want to return. In some areas, it might be that they wanted a second screen or a third screen, or in other areas, it might be as tough as, I've actually got a child at home that needs full-time care. I cannot afford XXX. I would then also ask, how are you doing work and taking care of that? So there's always that probing questions that you need to ask. So go and really understand the situation.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you. What I'm hearing is, as an organization, we now have a responsibility to really go and ask questions and listen, and then take that information and then consolidate and marry that with what the business requirements are. What are legacy elements that we are just continuously doing that we actually haven't thought about? Yes. Re-evaluate that, challenge our own thinking, and then come up with a model that contextually works for you.
And the major aspect is we cannot put the company at risk, because if the company does not exist and have a turnover, etc., we as employees will not be there. Yeah. So we cannot put the company at risk. And if we as employees have that understanding, we'll also not just see the view from our side, but the view from the company side. And I just wanted to make that clear, because no one person is bigger than a full or a company.
100%. At the end of the day, we're here to do a job, right? That's why it exists.
At least let's do it and enjoy it.
Let's do it and enjoy it. I want to thank you so much for joining me on the Wamly podcast. It's been an absolute privilege. I know that the viewers would have enjoyed this as much as I did. So really, thank you so much.
Awesome. It's a pleasure. Thanks, Francois.